Here's where we are in the governance series. We completed phase 1, seeing the system, letters 1 to 12. We are in phase 2, designing the system, letters 13 to 30. We completed stage 1, entering design, letters 13A and 13B. We completed stage 2, stabilizing the core, letters 14 to 17. We completed stage 3, seeing clearly, letters 18 to 20. We just completed letter 23, when authority depends on people instead of structure, which completed stage 4. From activity to coherence, letters 21 to 23. We are now in stage 5, preventing regression, letters 24 to 26. We are in letter 24, learning to navigate. Sometimes nothing changes, except the way we learn to see. If you have traveled through the previous 23 letters, something has likely changed. Perhaps not your governance approach, perhaps not your organizational structure, perhaps not even your strategic direction. Something far more subtle may have changed. The way you now observe your organization. At the beginning of this series, the structural patterns already existed. Governance theater did not suddenly appear because you read letter 1. Authority shadowing did not begin after you learned its name. Leadership signal inconsistency was already influencing decisions. Strategy execution disconnect was already shaping outcomes. Nothing new was added to the organization. What changed was your ability to recognize what had always been there. That is not simply learning. It is learning to see. What is the significance when experience meets language? Many people believe awareness is created by receiving more information. Experience suggests something different. Awareness is not created simply by presenting information. It emerges when experience and language meet. The experience belonged to you. Every meeting you attended, every decision you approved, every initiative that exceeded expectations, every initiative that quietly drifted away from its original intention. The language emerged throughout this series. Structural patterns, design responses, governance architecture, institutional resilience. For many executives, there was a moment when a familiar situation suddenly acquired a name. The organization had not become more complicated. It had become more visible. The structural patterns were not created by these letters. They were revealed through them. Stage 5 does not introduce a different organization to observe. It introduces a different way of observing it. It is the same 34 structural patterns viewed through a more mature lens. Imagine navigating a river for the very first time. At the beginning of the journey, your attention is consumed by the obvious, the rocks, the fallen trees, the narrowing channels, the changing current. Your focus is on avoiding obstacles. As your experience grows, something unexpected begins to happen. You stop looking only at the river. You begin noticing how you are navigating it. When do you hesitate? When do you react too quickly? When do you assume today's current will behave like yesterday's? The river has not changed. The navigator has. The first part of this series helped us recognize the structural patterns operating within our organizations. Stage 5 begins somewhere different. It invites us to notice the thinking we bring while observing those structural patterns. Something else has quietly begun changing. The executive has started learning a new discipline. That discipline is not governance. It is intentional observation. Governance remains the language. Intentional observation becomes the practice. In this moment, the questions become different. Until now, our questions have been primarily directed toward the organization. What structural pattern is operating? Who owns the decision? Where does authority reside? What design response will intentionally reshape this condition? Those questions remain essential. Beginning here, another set of questions quietly joins them. Questions that do not ask us to examine only the organization. Questions that invite us to observe ourselves. Think about the last governance exception you approved. What made that exception seem reasonable at the time? If another executive had approved exactly the same exception, would you have reached the same conclusion? Or would you have questioned it differently? What assumption were you protecting? What concern had already influenced your thinking before the discussion even began? If you encountered the same situation today for the first time, would you make exactly the same decision? Or has your way of seeing changed? Notice what these questions are doing. They are not evaluating the governance. They are inviting you to observe the thinking that interacts with the governance. That distinction may become one of the most valuable governance tools an executive ever develops. Throughout my consulting career, organizations have often invited me through one door while the work that ultimately mattered was waiting behind another. One organization requested technical expertise. The deeper work became organizational culture. Another requested sales training. The deeper work became awareness. Another requested governance design. The deeper work became learning to see the invisible structure shaping visible behavior. The original request was never wrong. It simply was not the final destination. Many organizations begin improving governance by searching for better frameworks, better technology, better processes, better reporting. Those have tremendous value. Yet eventually every executive reaches a different question. The question is no longer, do we have the right governance tools? It quietly becomes, are we seeing clearly enough to use the tools we already have? Letter 20 described a pattern many executives recognize on site. The organization already had procedures, already had standards, already had reorganized, already had consultants who restructured the org chart, documented the workflows, wrote the governance policy. The books those consultants read told them exactly what to do. And the same issues were still there. The explanation they thought at that time was structural. Those reorganizations addressed the visible layer, the structure that can be seen, documented, and reported on. What persisted beneath them were conditions those efforts were never designed to reach. This series was built to reach that deeper layer. 34 structural patterns named, a specific documented count, not an estimate, a design resolution written for every one of them. 23 letters, now spanning 4 complete stages, and still naming the right pattern correctly does not guarantee the design will hold. This is not the gap letter 20 described. That gap belonged to the organization, conditions invisible to procedure. This gap belongs somewhere else. It belongs to the executive's own way of seeing, the assumptions, exceptions, and habits of attention that operate beneath even an accurate diagnosis. A correctly named pattern observed by an unaware mind can still drift. A lighthouse does not create the shoreline. It does not remove the rocks. It does not calm the sea. It does not steer the ship. It simply allows the navigator to see what has always been there. Governance serves a similar purpose. It does not eliminate uncertainty. It does not remove complexity. It does not replace leadership. It helps organizations see themselves more clearly. The clearer an organization learns to see itself, the more intentionally it can choose its direction. Experienced navigators do not abandon intuition when they consult the compass. They have learned to read the current, feel the wind, recognize subtle changes, sense when something in the journey has shifted. The compass does not replace that experience. It gives experience a point of reference. Governance serves a similar purpose. It does not replace judgment, intuition, or leadership. It gives them language. It gives them structure. It allows experience to be examined instead of merely trusted. Throughout the series, the structural patterns and their design responses have become more than a library of governance concepts. Together, they have become a compass. They provide a common language that helps leaders recognize where the organization is today, remember what it intentionally chose to become, and notice when experience, intuition, and governance begin pointing in different directions. Like every experienced navigator, the executive learns that the compass is not consulted because confidence has disappeared. It is consulted because wisdom understands the value of occasionally confirming direction. Looking ahead, the previous stage asked, how do we intentionally design coherence? Stage 5 begins asking a different question. How do we intentionally sustain it? Organizations rarely abandon good governance intentionally. More often, they become occupied by new priorities. New leaders arrive, responsibilities change, markets evolve, reasonable exceptions accumulate. The challenge is no longer creating the design. The challenge becomes maintaining the awareness that allows the design to continue serving its purpose. As outlined in the Stage 5 blueprint introduced in Letter 13A, 7 structural patterns guide the next part of our journey: silent drift, strategic drift, decision amnesia, institutional memory loss, informal workarounds, policy accumulation, and dependency fragility. Each describes a different way a deliberately designed system can quietly begin moving away from what it originally intended to become. Letters 25 and 26 remain faithful to that blueprint. Each structural pattern will be examined together with its design response. The difference is not the patterns themselves. The difference is the perspective from which we will observe them. The next part of the journey asks us to notice not only what is happening within the organization, but also how our own observations, assumptions, and decisions influence what we are able to recognize before those patterns quietly become embedded again. The question is no longer whether you have a compass. The question is, how will you know when it is time to trust what the compass is telling you? Thank you.